Thanks, John. Garth Ruff, I'm the extension educator in Henry County. It's Napoleon way. My background's not in agronomy. It's certainly not in precision ag. It's more animal science. So about the first person they stuck me in a vehicle with on the job was Glenn Arnold. And one of the first things I learned in this job, if you spend much time with Glenn, you spend a lot of time talking about poop. All right, and that continues to today. So Sam kind of hinted in Darke County, Sam's been doing on-farm research with Dragline and Swine Manure for a number of years, and actually some of his plot data is going to be in this presentation. But we worked with 2 growers in Henry County using liquid swine manure to dragline and side dress corn. One of those studies is in your eFields book, page 36, 37, I think, and page 34 and 35 is going to be a trial from Darke County. Our second trial, we harvested the day the data was due, but we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So this is what we're doing. The volume's a little loud, but essentially Glenn Arnold, our field specialist.
Side dressing corn at the V2 to V3 stage with 6,200 gallons of swine manure per acre using a drag hose. We're covering about 9.5 acres per hour at a rate of about 1,000 gallons per minute, and we've got a 7-shank applicator that we're running with. This is a no-till corn field. You can see the hose pulling across the corn. We think we're doing a pretty good job here.
So that's what we're doing, and we're going to tell you kind of why and the reasoning behind it. There should have been another slide here, but we think by using especially swine manure as a side dress nitrogen source, we can accomplish 3 goals, both a yield goal, an economic goal, and an environmental goal, looking how we use that manure product. You can see here from small plot research, incorporated swine manure and even incorporated dairy manure is very competitive, very compatible with our UAN 28. Top half of the screen being pre-emergent treatments, and then the post-emergent applications. On the bottom half, we see we get about a 15 bushel increase when we pre-emerge apply liquid swine manure and incorporate it, and almost an 18 bushel increase in that small plot research. Some of the results from the long-term side dress plots in Darke County. You can see here 2014, 15, and 16 when we compare manure to commercial fertilizer. We're still pretty competitive in terms of a side dress nitrogen source. So that's kind of from a yield perspective, but on the environmental side, our goal is to apply manure. You know, we talked about the 4 R's, the right time being one of those. So to apply that nutrient at the right time, we can apply it on a growing crop is the ultimate goal, and able to capitalize on that nitrogen credit. Also, when we talk about timing, maybe those slides didn't stay there. All right. So when we talk about timing, you know, we've got a very limited window in which we can get out and apply these products based on the weather. We think of what was fall 2018 like from a manure application standpoint. All right, we got a lot of dairy manure in lagoons. We got a lot of manure in pits. So if we can get out there when the ground's pretty firm shortly after planting, somewhere before the V4 stage, V2 to V3 is kind of that sweet spot where we like to drag that hose across. But we can go up to V4 and not see a significant yield reduction from dragging the hose across the corn. Now at V5, we get a significant yield loss. We're no longer laying those corn plants over. We're actually snapping those stalks, all right, or pulling those taller plants out of the ground. But V2, V3, we're very comfortable dragging that hose on that side dress toolbar. So if we're going to use a drag hose, it's going to work best on either a no-till or a stale seed bed. When we have loose soil, we end up dragging more soil than ideal. We end up dragging that manure with the hose. In order to have a firm spot for that hose to drag, we can skip the application on that center row of that applicator. Leaves it a little bit drier and a nice alley for that hose to drag along. We can see stand reduction if we go in there to a soft or a field that's too wet. When we use the dragline, we can stand a little bit more moisture in the field if we're going to do a tanker plot. But what do we get when we use a tanker plot in wet soil? Compaction due to the tires, absolutely. So we think V2, V3, like I said, is a sweet spot. But ideally, if the conditions are right, from planting up to that V4 stage. So from an environmental standpoint, this is a study out of Iowa State, and we look at phosphorus availability and movement. We can look at the different manure sources there compared to fertilizer. So if we incorporate that phosphorus and apply it at a proper nutrient balance, if anybody's heard Glenn talk, this is kind of a point that we can drive home, that if we apply that manure, shooting for a 200 bushel corn crop, that's going to remove 74 pounds of P2O5, 54 pounds of potash, and then the second year of that rotation, soybean crop, we're going to remove 48 pounds of P2O5 and 84 pounds of potash. So we look at our total removal here, 122 pounds of phosphorus, 138 potash, 6,500 gallon of manure. Trying to, of course, meet the nitrogen needs and have a phosphorus and potassium balance as we go along here. In this situation, as the tri-state removal recommendations stand today, we can actually remove about 5 pounds of phosphorus in that 2-year rotation. And we get a pretty good balance as far as P and K are concerned. So in Henry County, especially in Henry County, we're not near as much livestock as there once was. All right, especially hogs. But as the new packing plant went into Coldwater, Michigan, and our integrators have expanded to meet the needs of that plant, and of course meet the needs of the current or the contracts they already had, we've seen some interest in building swine barns, especially in the southern part of Henry County. We had 2 new barns go in 2017. Kind of the background of both of those instances is that the principal operator wanted to bring the second generation back to the farm and utilize that swine barn as a way to do that with extra revenue. From a pit management standpoint, if we can apply manure in the summer and empty that pit, we're not near as dependent on good fall application weather, or we're not near as dependent on wheat in the rotation, to apply to wheat stubble. Both these farmers do grow wheat, and one of them does make some corn silage for their beef cattle operation. So they got a variety of options as far as manure application goes. As far as both sites go, the fields we did plots on in 2018 well within the maintenance range as far as phosphorus is concerned. We can talk a little bit about the manure values in the plot that's in the eFields book. When I first started around with Glenn, we go to these fields and the corn crop's planted on 45-degree angle. And the reason we plant that corn on a 45-degree angle is for the drag hose operator, we want that longest pole to be the first one, and then get successively shorter if at all possible. So in Henry County, both barns set at a location about like this. We lay the hose there between the barn and the field, and that longest pole to the corner, and we essentially split that 60-acre rectangle into 2 triangles. Apply our manure nutrients on one half, go back, do the other, and we left 3 check strips in each one of our trials to compare with 28% liquid 28. All right. So this is what's in the eFields book, page 35, 36 in the Henry County trial. You've got the study information there, plant date, May 12th, harvest date, early December. Soil type, 100% Hoytville clay. That's not a typo. Very fortunate that in southern Henry County, we have pretty consistent soil. All right, most of it's just somewhat unforgiving Hoytville clay. But we look at our treatments here. We had 220 pounds of side-dress nitrogen, either from liquid swine manure or 28. So in the first year, as we get these cooperators kind of interested in doing these dragline plots, side-dress plots, we want to assure that there's enough nitrogen in the field that they're going to have a good corn crop. All right, and I don't think that was an issue here. But we also tried to balance for P and K. All right, as far as phosphorus goes, in this manure test, we had 11 pounds of phosphorus per 1,000 gallons. About 43 pounds of total N. 34 of that were available for that growing crop. All right. So we try to balance for phosphorus. We've got plenty of nitrogen. In 2019, we're going to cut this rate way down. All right. We know that we had plenty of nitrogen for that particular field. So when we look at the yield results, moisture was the same. But in 2018, in this particular field in southwest Henry County, we actually had a 9 bushel advantage using the commercial fertilizer. All right, 9 bushel advantage, statistically significant. In our other plot in Henry County, there was no difference. Statistically, numerically, we had about a 2 bushel advantage with the commercial fertilizer. So weather, I think we can agree over the years of doing this and talking with Glenn and Sam, weather plays a huge role into how competitive that manure, that nitrogen is going to be compared to our commercial end sources. Yes, sir.
Okay, but you had to buy the 28, and the swine manure was produced in the barn, so was there...
You're one step ahead of me. You're one step ahead of me. Yep, one step ahead of me.
I like that.
So yeah, at the end of the day, both of our cooperators are very happy with how their plots turned out, even though there was a yield difference in both cases favoring the liquid 28. But when we look at the economics for the study that's in the E-Fields book, the commercial applicator is going to charge us 0.7 cents to apply that manure at 6,500 gallons an acre. Small setup fee to get the hoses and the pumps there. We're somewhere around $50 an acre to apply that liquid swine manure. All right. As far as the 28 goes, I think Jason used this number in his presentation: 40 cents per unit of N at 220 units. $88 an acre. We have a fee of applying that nitrogen. We got time. We've got a tractor. We've got fuel. So we got about a $46 difference. All right, 9 bushel difference at 350 corn. You know, we got a slight advantage to the manure as far as the economics are concerned. If my math, yeah. So that's the interesting part with the economics. You know, we think we can get a yield advantage in most years using liquid swine manure and the side-dress dragline system. Here's the economic difference. Even when commercial fertilizer beats the manure by up to 9 bushel, I think we could actually went to about 14 bushel. That's where we'd be even from an economic standpoint. But from an environmental standpoint, you know, especially in the western Lake Erie Basin, if we can extend our application season, move more of that traditional fall application to late summer or late spring, early summer, we don't have to rely on wheat as much. You know, most of our growers or contract growers are probably going to grow a little wheat for manure management, just in case we can't, you know, get out there and use that product more efficiently. So really the goal with this is to get these toolbars. We got 3 of them across the watershed, Glenn and his program. Get this technology in the hand of not only contract growers, but these swine integrators. You know, the contract grower is probably more interested in the yield and the economics. but I think our integrators are certainly interested in the environmental impact of efficient use of manure. Yes, sir.
With those rates, is this phosphorus full at that level?
So it depends on what our soil test P levels are to begin with. If we go back to that slide where we looked at this here, we're pretty sustainable over time in that 2-year corn-soybean rotation. Or we can even, in the case of we got an integrator that's making silage, we can probably lower that phosphorus level, soil value even more as we chop that corn.
But the point would be if you started out and had 45 parts per million to start with, and you maintain this system, you get rid of the manure, use it as a nutrient, and
not build phosphorus, not build soil test phosphorus. Yep. That's the ultimate goal, I think, at the end of the day, especially in the western Lake Erie Basin.
I'll just get them all to do it.
It takes the technology. It's going to take more than 3 toolbars to make that happen. And from a dollar and cent standpoint, it takes a pretty good-sized tractor. In Henry County, we had a 9630 Deere, and that needed a full rack of weights on the front in order to pull the hose we had there that day. Yeah, that's a good question. So if you own your own hoses, you're about going to have to own that tractor anyway. We were fortunate to work with a grant to provide the tractor these applicators to pull that hose across. I think when we switched PowerPoints, we kept the old one. Yep. But 2 pages in front of that's Sam's study. He's been working, like I say, with those contract growers in Darke County for a number of years. But we typically still see a advantage to swine manure in terms of yield and economics. So we talk about dragging that hose across, and that's some upcoming research that Glenn and the guys at Hoytville are going to work on 2019 and for the next few years. Does the size of the hose impact stand loss? Can we go to a 4.5-inch hose and apply that manure at V5 potentially? Or some of our integrators have suggested they're going to go to a bigger hose, and what's that going to do at V3? That 7-inch hose versus 4.5. The one we used at Henry County was a 5.5. It's heavy. The question was, what about the weight of a full hose?
It probably takes more horsepower than the friggin' applicator.
Yeah, pulling that hose fulls, because you got downforce on the stinger of that applicator. That's where a lot of the weight and a lot of the drag is going to be.